organizational transformation while managing large engineering, software development, product and commercial teams, and he will be making a presentation called Journey to a Trillion.
Good day, everyone.
Good day.
Good day, everyone.
Good day.
Or is it good afternoon?
Good afternoon.
One of the worst things to do is to speak just before lunch. But I'm here, and what I'm going to speak about is probably going to make you a bit excited and give you something to think about as you go for lunch. All protocols observed. I'd like to recognize our Director for Diaspora, our State Department for Diaspora Affairs, of course representing the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Diaspora. I'd like to thank Fabian and the Pan-African Council that I got to meet today. And most importantly, I'd like to thank, I can't see Shelmith, DTB, for allowing us to be here as WAPIPE. Such great presentations today, such powerful speeches today. I did not expect the conversation to go as it has. I've really learned a lot in this presentation. So I'll structure my talk, which will be very short, in 3 parts. Of course, a shameless plug about WAPIPE. Then I'll talk about a sustainability report that we did earlier in the year. And we called it A Journey to a Trillion. Can everyone say a trillion?
Trillion.
Does that sound like a lot of money?
Not really.
Shillings or dollars?
A trillion shillings. I know we are at the Diaspora Investment Symposium. Definitely we have to talk about money, isn't it? As well as all the issues and how does that money get to those issues. And then finally I'll talk about the assertions, the things we're doing and from the findings of the report, as well as what practicals we have seen. But ladies and gentlemen, allow me to begin with some few facts about money. At the risk of picking a nickname like Amin, Veggie Man, I will sound like Eddie Money. Please do not assign that nickname to me. Antigua last year received $35 million from diaspora. We had a very good definition. I love His Excellency McDonald talking about and defining what diaspora is. $35 million. Barbados received $85 million into the country from diaspora. That's about 1.3%. South Africa received $803 million. It's about 0.2% of GDP. 0.2. She asked, why don't we talk about South Africa? Zambia received $240 million, which is about 0.8% of their GDP. Now you can tell I'm picking the countries of those people I recognize who are going to be in attendance in this conference. Then we have St. Lucia that received $64 million last year from diaspora, in the definition of a diaspora, which is about 2.6 of their GDP. Now it gets a bit more interesting. Colombia, let me start with Jamaica. Jamaica, interestingly, only has 14 million people, but received 3.6 billion US dollars. Ladies and gentlemen, we're talking about investments here.
14 billion.
3.6 billion US dollars into the country last year, which accounted to 18.9% of their GDP. It gets more interesting. Colombia received 10 billion US dollars last year from diaspora. $10 billion, about 2.8% of their GDP. We're trying to attract investors, but we Africans ourselves are investors.
Yeah.
WAPIPE means where in Swahili. For those who don't know Swahili. And our mission is to answer this one question. Where in the world do you pay? Not just Kenyans, but every single African. Whether you're in Africa or out of Africa. Where in the world do you pay? And WapiPay is the first licensee in Kenya and Uganda to process digital remittances. Now, ladies and gentlemen, remittances have come a long way. For those, show of hands who have been a diaspora here. I can see most of us have. How did you used to receive money? I can tell you how I used to receive money. Oh, you're the new school. Nowadays, it's to find out who is traveling.
Travelers checks.
Who is traveling? They all go to their house, they give them the money,
They bring
and
it
they
back.
get there, they give you the money. That's how money used to move, guys, from diaspora back home. They've come a long way now to Western Union and MoneyGram, but yet again, Western Union and MoneyGram, you physically walk to a location, you give cash. You get an MTCN number, right? You send the MTCN number to the person receiving it. Then they have to come out from the village that they're in, look for Western Union or Mama Money to remove
Mama
that
money.
money that you sent them.
That's amazing.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was very expensive. It was up to 15% of the amount of money that they sent. But it's come a long way when I say that WapiPay now does digital. Because we've built a technology that allows you to move from bank to card to mobile. So today, whatever platform you're using, for instance, in the US, we focus on the destination. You will not go to a WapiPay office to receive cash, but you will see WapiPay in your mobile phone. You will see WapiPay in your bank account. You will not receive physical cash. And what we've managed to do for our partners, and you know most of them, from TransferWise to Remitly, Landfine, Nala, you know all of them, Sendway, all of them. What we've managed is to help them deliver value from diaspora into not only Kenya, Uganda, and Nigeria in basically 30 seconds. Thank you, you can clap again. I didn't only write that intro, but I also need to build a platform myself. We have an amazing team that does that. But what I'm trying to say is, we've made money move faster. What happens, like the lessons we've learned from M-Pesa and mobile money, when we make money move faster, a lot more things move faster.
Yes.
A lot more decisions move faster.
Faster, yes.
A lot more opportunities get implemented faster. And the journey to $1 trillion, I welcome you as I now move to the report, the sustainability report. You can see that, you can pick that from our desk. The report is called A Journey to $1 Trillion. The journey to $1 trillion is because the Kenyan government that came in, of course, very well represented here by Director Boniface, but I'd like to call him Ambassador Boniface, set a very aggressive mission. How do we move from 550 billion Kenya shillings to 1 trillion Kenya shillings? That is, how do we move from $4 billion US to 10 billion US dollars? Now, we have to go back on the ground and find out, of this 4.1 billion US dollars, how has it been moving? Why has it been moving? And for what purpose has it been moving? And that's what you will find in our sustainability report on the journey to 1 trillion. Like I told you, diaspora are very resilient, but only 15% of that money is sent. And that 15% is disposable income. Unfortunately, they send that money because somebody is sick in the hospital. For diaspora to do is, once they land there, and they're there to work very hard and be resilient make enough money to send back home is find an account where to receive money to be able to send it back home. So most of them fall back on opening community bank accounts. Community bank accounts, not most of them deal with ATMs, most of them deal with you physically walk in and cash your check and get your salary in cash. And then you're stuck with cash, and how do you get that cash back home? It's extremely difficult for these people. So we have a big challenge of banked diasporans. And this is specifically for Kenyans. What happens when you can't bank? Or what is the reason they can't be banked? We found very quickly a large number are undocumented. This is not news. I know you all know. There's a large diaspora across all countries, not just the US, who are undocumented. But here's what makes me wonder. These Kenyans, unlike, for instance, the South American countries, who can get on a boat and just cross over and get to it. I think we misuse this word undocumented. This Kenyan got a passport, got an air ticket, flew, and got a job. Their work visa expired. They're not going to stop working. And believe it or not, they are paying taxes to the IRS. We even met with the IRS and we knew they know who they are and they're paying taxes. We asked them about their documentation status. They said, no, that's a different department. You go deal. If you want to deal with that, you go deal with that department. Bottom line, what am I saying? Diaspora are undocumented and unbanked. Yet they send how much? Kenya, for who remembers the number?
4 billion.
Who remembers the number? 4.1 billion US dollars. Billion US dollars. That's 550 billion shillings. That is more than the 830 million in South Africa. Oh. Not as much as Nigeria. I told you I run the risk of being called any money after this. But I'm sure Senior Counsel Odera will come and talk about the undocumented. But it's a real challenge today for a lot of these diaspora people. The second point in finding is a lot of these diaspora people suffer something called loss and improvidence of the remittance that they send. I don't know for those who are not Kenyan, if you have stories where you have somebody in the diaspora who has been sending money consistently every month for a house that is supposed to be building, as Amin says, in that village. But you've been sending that money to your brother. Oh, and he sends you pictures of the progress. 2 years later, you turn out, he was taking pictures of the neighbor's house. There is no house. These focus groups, and the reason why we kept them small is so that these conversations can happen. And sadly, a lot of money is lost. We're talking about 4.1 trillion. I bet it's probably that 10 billion that is lost out of the money not being used for what it was sent for. It's a real challenge. We can have all the technology and build the technology and make it fast, 30 seconds, it moves. But if the money is not being used for the purpose that it's sent, we have a bigger problem. And these forums are important to have this discussion because we're here to talk about there is investor money. But we do the easy work, we make the money move. I was saying it to Fabian. But the hard work is these programs that they have to organize to make sure that the money is used for the purpose it's used for. There's access, there's value that is given back to these diasporians who send the money, and etc. I started with the last one, which is the second and third generation. As we think about investments, remember these second and third generations are the ones who it's probably easier for them to get a bank account. The market in the US, you will get a single digit. But the money market fund today, as of today, you can get up to 18%. And that is money being invested locally. But those are money market funds. I heard, and thank you Beatrice for suggesting, because we had this discussion even with both the central bank and the CMA about this bond, this diaspora bond. How do we get to this 1 trillion? If even just half of it came through a bond that the diaspora earn an interest, they don't need to earn the 21% 365 treasury bill that they earn. They just need to be able to know that they're earning that money, and that money is being used towards something that is adding value to their communities or to where they are. And then finally, one of the other things they mentioned is we're trying to set up either the diaspora bond or have those conversations, and the integration to DAO CST. I'm sure you had Ambassador mention it, or Director mention it, is the one global account. Why should that diaspora, who is a registered citizen of the country they've come from, struggle to have or open an account in another country and receive their salaries and their dues? From the source to the destination, they should be able to have just one account. I loved, with all that information I've shared, I loved what His Excellency McDonald said. Be curious. I've given you numbers. Be curious. Be extremely curious. I heard a great conversation on agriculture and how do you get them encouraged to invest in agriculture and to invest back home. One thing I know for sure from our time and the time we spend in technology is attention is a new currency. Attention is a new currency. How do you drive and develop attention amongst this diaspora? And finally, now that I've done a bit of demystifying, I think I mentioned it 5 days before, where there's mystery, there's margin. This thing we call diaspora and how the money moves is extremely mysterious. And there are people who intentionally keep it mysterious because there's margin. It's time for us to tap into that margin. Again, investors, investment symposium, not diaspora. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
A permit or somebody's permission to travel the globe, specifically Africa. For the history students, you will remember that in a few short months, between, I believe it was November 1884, I don't think any of us were there, to February 1885, a few men gathered in Berlin. And in gathering in Berlin, they parceled out chunks of land in Africa and created boundaries. And in creating those boundaries, it came along with rules and regulations as to how one can move from one part of the continent to another. It even became much more difficult, especially for inhabitants of Africa, because they were not part of that conversation. Indeed, it created such absurdities. Not too long ago, some of you might know, we had a vice president in this country called Moody Awori, who was a vice president in Kenya. His brother was a minister for information in Uganda. And how did that come into being? The border crossed their village. Brother found themselves on one side, and the other warriors found themselves on the other side. That has also become a problem, especially for some of these communities who are pastoralists and who migrate depending on the weather patterns. Amongst the Maasais, they have faced an interesting problem in that for many generations they have migrated from Laikipia all the way to Arusha depending on the time of the year they find themselves in. And during their migration, they've accosted this problem of immigration. Are they supposed to obtain permits to move across their grazing lands from one end of Kenya to the other side of Tanzania? Those are the things that kind of, at a very basic level, brings into fore the significance of the topic I want to discuss this afternoon. And I'll try to be brief about it, because it is one of those things, if we start a discussion, it will take a very, very long time. Citizenship in Kenya is provided for under our constitution. And the constitution I'm talking about is the one which was promulgated in the year 2010 in August, Kenyans having participated in coming up with it. It recognized citizen by birth, which is easy to define, because a person is a citizen by birth if on the day of that person's birth, whether or not the person is born in Kenya, either the mother or the father of the person is a citizen. That of course becomes a bit problematic, because we are sure about who our mothers are. I'm not sure who our fathers are. People say maternity is a fact, but paternity is a question of faith. So take it that when we are told so and so is your father, we men are very people of faith, deep faith, so we accept it. Then we do also have an interesting provision which says a child found in Kenya who is or appears to be less than 8 years of age and whose nationality and parents are not known is presumed to be a Kenyan citizen. And then we also have a person who is a Kenyan citizen by birth and who has ceased to be a Kenyan citizen because the person acquired citizenship of another country is entitled on application to gain Kenyan citizenship. The second category of citizens that we do have a citizenship by registration, and that would be of interest to many of us in this room. It contemplates that a person who has been married to a citizen for a period of at least 7 years is entitled on application to be registered as a citizen of this country. And then the second category of citizenship by registration is a person who has been lawfully resident in Kenya for a continuous period of at least 7 years and who satisfies the conditions which have been prescribed by Parliament may apply to be registered as a citizen. The third category is a child who is not a citizen but is adopted by a citizen is entitled on application to be registered as a citizen. Dual citizenship has been recognized, but that particular provision refers to a citizen by birth who does not lose their Kenyan citizenship merely by acquiring a citizenship of another country. Other than where a person has obtained citizenship by birth, those who have obtained citizenship by registration may have the same revoked if that person acquired that citizenship fraudulently or by false representation or concealment of any material fact, or the person has during any war in which Kenya was engaged and lawfully traded or communicated with an enemy who has been engaged in or associated with any business that was knowingly carried on in such manner as to assist the enemy during that war. And the third instance in which that citizenship can be revoked is that if within 5 years after registration, that person is convicted of an offense and sentenced to imprisonment for a term in excess of 3 years, that person is liable to lose their citizenship. That is one end of how one can become a citizen. But the other areas which I do believe would be of interest are the various permits which are contemplated under our immigration laws. Those permits range from, and I'll be discussing them shortly, from work permits, residencies, and those kind of permits. But for now, I would just like to bring to our attention that the Kenya Citizenship and Immigration Act, which is an act of parliament enacted in the year 2011, and it was the successor to what was previously known as the Immigration Act, is an act of parliament which provides for matters relating to citizenship, issuance of travel documents, immigration, and for all connected purposes. It is an act which donates various powers, majorly to the Cabinet Secretary, who has the power to make regulations and in prescribing the types of visas and specifying the persons, group, or persons or countries whose citizens shall be required to obtain or whose citizens are exempted from obtaining visas before entering Kenya. Under Section 40 of the Act, there are specific provisions on how to make applications for the issuance of the various permits contemplated under the Act, and the department which is charged with the responsibility of considering those applications is the Department of Immigration. Generally speaking, whichever type of application one is making, there are various requirements which are prescribed both under the Act and the regulations which have been made thereunder. The common requirements is, firstly, there has to be, if it is a work permit, you will require a cover letter from an employer or an organization which one proposes to work, the copies of your national passport from whichever country you've come from. For purposes of identification, you'll be required to submit colored passport size photographs. Application fees are payable, and there's a form which you're expected to fill. Happily for us these days, all these things can be done online, unlike the old days when one would have permit. Refugees are protected by international law, but even having come as refugees, they do have various permits.
I think it's after this.